Good morning, good morning, good morning again, folks. Welcome to today's final front load and another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We are going to that horrible world known as the JRC, but before we do it, the disclaimers. If you are brand new to the Stop the Shocks campaign and the campaign against the troubled teen industry, you are going to find all the pertinent links right up top in the description box. One of the most noteworthy is the article written by NeuroClastic, where they interviewed and surveyed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so-called behavior modification program. It is a particular article that the Judge Rotenberg Center felt was so threatening that they have threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit if they did not remove it from the website. NeuroClastic has refused, so please read that article and share it on all your social media. You're going to find also linked in there their public statement regards to the defamation lawsuit threat, as well as their link to their GoFundMe. Also, another disclaimer. When we speak on places like the JRC and like Agape Boarding School, you're going to get vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, folks, please go ahead and use those headphones. Another trigger warning. This channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity on occasion and speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, very obviously, parental supervision is very much advised, all right? So, where we left off, international human rights law and aversives. Remember, I have talked to you about that convention on the rights of people with disabilities in the United States and Iran being the two countries in the world who've not signed that paper? Yeah, that. The rights of both children and people with disabilities to be free of cruel and degrading treatment are addressed in numerous instruments of international human rights law, including both more general conventions on human rights and the specific ones on issues pertaining to those groups. For instance, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which addresses the rights of all human beings, guarantees that no one shall be subject to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. This is, if you remember, that special repertoire on torture where we've had two different seating heads address the U.S. federal government directly, demanding there be a federal investigation into the JRC, and we've gotten nowhere? Yeah, that. The prohibition against such treatment is bolstered and further elaborated upon in the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, and Degrading Treatment or Punishment. Convention Against Torture, which torture is defined as, this is where we're getting specific in our language, folks. Any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as punishing him for an act he or a third person has committed or suspecting have committed, or intimidating or coercing him or a third person, or for any reason based on discrimination of any kind, with such pain and or suffering is inflicted by or at the instigation of or with the consent of acquiescence of the public official or other person acting in an official capacity. This is what we're trying to get on the law books in the US that is already on file for the UN and has been since 2009. Yeah. Great, right? Anybody who wants to look to the US as a beacon and inspiration in regards to respect for human rights, allow me to dissuade you of that notion right now. Because, let me put it bluntly to you, the US does not respect peoples with disabilities, human and civil rights. Matter of fact, they don't view us as human at all. Okay? We are looked at as inconvenience in the best of lights. All right? Let's move on, shall we? Like the ICCPR, the Convention Against Torture protects all peoples and countries which have ratified it. Both of these instruments call upon the individual states that sign on to them to establish and enforce legal means of protecting the rights mentioned within them and the violations thereof, which is what those two bills were trying to get passed and have been for almost a decade now, are very specifically addressing. This is why language is extremely important, folks. You cannot leave any room for interpretation when it comes to the treatment and education of disabled folks. Okay? This is a situation where we have to live in reality and understand the fact that you have to force these people's hands in regards to respecting our rights as human beings. You can't be nice about it. You can't just, well, I trust that they'll do the right thing. Because they won't, folks. They will line their coffers with their bribe money and comfort themselves with getting brand new homes off of our pain. This is just reality here, okay? The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This is the one I talk about all the time, folks. The CRPD guarantees the people it covers the right to be free of torture, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment, as well as from more general violence, exploitation, and abuse. It goes on to establish that every person with disabilities has a right to respect for his or her physical, mental integrity on equal basis with others. Meanwhile, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC, has its own provision banning torture and cruel and inhuman degrading treatment. In fact, it requires state parties to the convention to make measures to provoke recovery and integration of child victims of such treatment, as well as abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Like JRC and the troubled teen industry, folks, in case you want to know exactly what this is targeting here. It further provides that children, to the extent possible given their age and maturity, should have the right to express their views on any matter affecting them and have those views taken into consideration in decisions. Additionally, both treaties explicitly mention the right of children with disabilities to enjoy full and equal participation in society. Now, here's what we've been talking about for years on this channel. However, the United States has not joined in ratifying either convention. So again, folks, if you think it doesn't affect you because your kid isn't disabled, this is the time your ears need to perk up. Because this means not even your neurotypical kids' rights are respected or valued in the United States. Okay? Your kids are not any safer than the disabled kids are. And you need to start paying attention now, neurotypical parents. Because if you haven't noticed, particularly in those places where the GOP holds full sway, corporal punishment is being reintroduced back into the school systems. This is not just our fight, it's also yours. And as long as you continue to remain blissfully unaware, you're putting your own neurotypical children at risk. Okay? If you pay attention to nothing else, if you don't care what happens to us, you're an asshole. But I know it's prevalent. your kids aren't safe either. Okay? And if you don't believe me, start looking it up. All right? Because it isn't just our fight, it's yours. And you've been ignoring it for far too long. The most significant involvement of the international community on the issue of aversives in a U.S. educational setting occurred in 2010, when the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture declared the use of contingent skin shock, long-term restraint, and other aversives practiced at the Judge Rotenberg Center in Massachusetts to be torture under international law. This declaration was based on an urgent appeal to the Special Rapporteur on Torture by an international disability rights organization, which alleged these techniques used at the program violated the Convention Against Torture based on the above-mentioned definition. Unlike the CRC or the CRPD, the U.S. has actually signed on to the Convention Against Torture and is thus bound to uphold the Convention's terms within its own borders, but hasn't to this very day when it comes to disabled kids. And now that is starting to have repercussions in the non-disabled world. You all ignored us. You ignored our pain. You ignored our issues and the fact that we're being tortured. And guess what, folks? Circa 2023, it's coming back to bite you in the ass. Because your negligence and your lack of empathy in regards to what was happening to disabled kids, guess what? Now your own kids are at risk. And you can sit there and tell me that it's never going to happen to your kid all you want to. But it will. Yeah. While the federal government has not taken direct or open steps towards the ending of the use of aversives at the program or in similar settings as of yet, discussions between the UN and the Obama administration led to the latter putting pressure on the Massachusetts government to act on this issue. The problem is, and what people inside the international community don't appear to understand, is the reach that the troubled teen industry and places like JRC have. There is almost a bias when it comes to the international community, when it comes to the United States. It is more prevalent amongst the GOP, sure, but it is actually prevalent everywhere. It's this idea that some unknown outside world entity is not going to tell us Americans how to live. Right? Yeah, that. In particular, we live in a world where the evangelical churches hold a great deal of power, more than the left realizes, because they are blissfully out in not GOP hellscapes. Okay? There is a real prejudice against the UN that is quasi-religious in nature. Okay? I need you to understand that. Because this is one of the reasons why the GOP get up in arms whenever the UN tries to, in any way, shape, or form, enforce their conventions that the US has actually signed on to. Remember, you have people like Trump and his followers trying to say that we should, as a country, remove ourselves from NATO and from the UN. Okay? We good on that? Good, because I needed to help you understand why, in fact, that we signed on to this convention, it has never once been actually enforced. Another reason is there is too much trust for the so-called progressive Democrat states to do the right thing on behalf of the federal government. Okay? It's this idea that if I just use my federal pressure to push a true investigation, things will change. It won't. Okay? Quite simply, the JRC has too much power within the state of Massachusetts for that state to take any real legal action against them. Okay? You cannot rely on these states to do their own investigations because they won't. Okay? That's why these investigations cannot be left up to the states. They have to be federal. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to chase our tails here and get nowhere. We're going to go ahead and close on that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed from time to time. So folks, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit those comments. I do appreciate your time this morning. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. I'll see you next week.